Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 4 of No Way Jose, starring the Boston Mass, Jose Raymond, brought to you by his website, thebostonmass.com. Also, check out his YouTube channel, The Boston Mass. Follow him on Instagram at the THEE with 2 E's, Boston Mass. And now all the way from somewhere in the North Shore of the great state of Massachusetts, Jose Raymond. What's up, bro?
Great job, Ron. Yeah, that was a great ad. I'm going to have to record that and put that everywhere.
I should have thrown Rumble or something. But I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, you do a good job.
I try, man. I try to be a good hype man. So I wanted to talk to you about, this is something I've always wanted to have like a deep conversation with you about. We never have the time. Every time I'm around you, it's like, you have an entourage or whatever, or I'm friggin' doing something. So, I've been like annoying to you in this about this for years, I'm sure, because I sort of had this idea that growth hormone was like the holy grail, only because I wasn't using it. So anything that I wasn't using must be what's missing, the missing piece of the puzzle.
Right.
And I also know a mutual friend of ours who I believed grew an entire weight class over about 1.5 to 2 years with nothing else changing except that he added growth hormone to the regimen. I don't know if that's even accurate, but that's what I want to get into today is how necessary is growth hormone for someone who's trying to optimize their physique? Meaning, if you're on gear, you're going to get X amount of results. If you add growth hormone, are you going to get X plus Y equals Z type of results? Are you going to get a more synergistic effect? Are you going to be bigger than you would have been? So that's where I want to start.
I think there are so many answers to that. As most of the questions are, that's the way I look at it. Number one, I'm not a doctor.
Right.
So I want to make that clear. I'm not a chemist, a doctor, a specialist, a endocrinologist, or any of those things. I speak strictly off of experience, my observations through the years of what I know of people to have done, myself, experimentation, et cetera, et cetera. In no way am I advocating any of this. And am I even consider myself an expert in this field, but I do have more experience than maybe a lot of our listeners, and they may be interested to hear what I think. So number one, Ron,
yeah,
is it a magic potion? Is it this end all be all? Absolutely not. No, it's not. You can win national shows. You can win at a very high level without it, for sure. And I know there's people who have.
Yeah.
I have. So that's number one. Everything starts with genetics. So let's say Ronnie Coleman never used growth hormone and Sean Ray did.
Yeah.
Ronnie still would have beaten Sean Ray without the growth hormone. That's just an example. And I'm just using those names.
Sure.
But you get what I'm saying. These superior genetics are always going to trump. Now, if Ronnie stayed the 220-pound natural version of Ronnie, would he have beaten Sean Ray all those times? Probably not. But without growth hormone, I want to say that Ronnie still would have won and been crazy. But at the elite level of, let's say, the top 5 this year, of Phil, of Hadi, of Brandon, of Rami,
Bonak.
of Bonak. Now, does it make a difference? It's like saying, back in the day when, all these race cars were all even, and then someone added a supercharger. That supercharger kept winning until they all added superchargers.
Right.
And then they had to add a little bit more horsepower. And I think that's where it falls in. I think when all things are equal, you know, pretty much all those guys have similar elite genetics.
Yeah.
And you add that one other component, can it edge them out? You know, would it add, you know, 6, 8, 12 pounds of muscle, of fullness? And that's something I noticed that I don't think it ever did anything magnificent for me, aside from maybe you can hold some more fullness when you're dieting. And you're you know, an extremely low calories, burning a ton of calories, doing 2 hours of cardio. It might still allow you to hold on to some fullness, some size towards the end. But I never saw, and to be perfectly honest, I was never a big advocate of using a ton of it, you know. And for the people that say, well, you had the huge roid gut or GH gut, no, it's just the majority of it is eating. You know, I ate so much to try to grow. You know, could some of it have been caused by that? I don't know. Maybe it did, but I never used large amounts to the point where I would think that would happen. You know, certainly not the numbers that I've heard. Like
Well,
people use.
What have you heard, and what was a good range for you that you felt comfortable with? What have you heard as far as extreme amounts or higher amounts that other guys use?
Using 18 of Sarahstim a day, a bottle of Sarahstim a day.
So who's paying for that? They're not.
Well, they're probably people who move it around a bit quite themselves. So I just would never see the need for that. To me, the sweet spot would be 4 to 6 units a day. And the way I did it would be 2 as soon as I got out of bed and 2 before I went to bed.
Very conservative.
3 before, you know, when I got out of bed, and 3 before I went to bed. A lot of people break it up and do it prior to workouts. But I think they're using it along with insulin as well. Yeah. Which I didn't do. I didn't come up with some crazy concoction of using it with insulin. Yeah. I just used it as a means to hopefully add a few pounds of muscle, make me sharper. And to be quite honest with you, this is funny that I'm telling this story. Back in 2011, I met a woman who had a son who was a little person. A little person. And he was now in high school, and he had shot up to like 5'8".
Oh, wow.
And he no longer needed it, nor did he want to be, you know, using that stuff. Yeah. But she still had the script for it. So he would come to my house with a sealed cooler and cut the seal. Yeah. Open it, and the ice,
the smoke would come out.
Yeah, it was brand new, and I'm like, holy shit! And it was called Norditropin, these little Norditropin pins. Yeah. And so I used that for that year, and that was probably the craziest ever. That my, like, even my face changed over the course of that. My like face was so sucked. It didn't even look like me when I saw the pictures. And you know, it was a, you know, I'm probably being a little too honest here, but it is what it is. It's part of the sport. I tried it. Yeah. That was probably the one and only time I had non-tampered with, you know, because any other time you get growth, it's, you know, if it's not Chinese, it's probably not been temperature regulated by the time it got from A to B to you. And this was already mixed on ice, went from the cooler into my fridge into me. And it was the most bananas thing. It was, to this day, the most conditioned I ever was.
Wow. And do you attribute that was probably a lot more potent, a lot more pure than any other GH you had after that?
After or before? Yeah. It
Or
was
before, after that? Yeah.
it was 100% real, from the pharmacy to this woman's house. She drove it over to my house and cut the seal in front of me.
Awesome.
And it was unbelievable. It only lasted, probably 6 or 8 months until her husband caught on to it and was like, "You don't need this shit anymore. My insurance is getting charged for this." And she was like, I'm making money off it.
Yeah. I have to back up and talk just the what they call the GH gut. You've seen that I've developed a gut over the years, I'm sure. I didn't have a gut. I look at the pictures when I was a natural competitor, and I had a pretty flat stomach. Like my son Christian's got a 27-inch waist. I don't think mine was ever 27, but still, I didn't build that gut through GH because I didn't have GH or insulin. It was just overeating, stuffing myself 6 times a day, as much food, as much carbs as I could pound down, tons of water, day after day for years, and I was on gear. And I think that's enough to blow out your gut. So a lot of these so-called GH guts that you see, so I don't think they're all GH guts. I think anybody that overeats and really force feeds himself over a period of years, and I'm sure the gear has something to do with it too, because it promotes muscle growth and your colon, your stomach, those are all muscle. It's all muscle tissue. It's smooth muscle, but it must be affected by steroids in a similar way. It must grow. But there's one thing people say: the physiques back in the day, 80s and 90s, there was a huge shift, and they started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And most people attribute that to growth hormone and insulin being added to the mix. I don't want to confuse this and start talking about insulin, but do you believe growth hormone did play a part in the physiques getting bigger starting around the Dorian era?
Sure, of course. As I said, I think there is a certain amount of that you're going to hold if it's, whether it's 6 pounds or 8 pounds or 10 pounds, that's still more muscle. That's bigger. Yeah. So, I don't know, like the 90s, like, I don't know how much those guys were doing it back then, but like, to me, across the board, those guys were huge. Like most of them were tall and from Nasser to even Flex Wheeler, 5'10". That's a pretty tall guy. How many guys in the lineup are 5'10" today? Not a whole lot.
No.
Ronnie was 5'11", Dorian, all those guys, Paul Dillette, they were taller, bigger, huge guys.
Nasser, Gunter,
yeah, which made what Sean did and Lee Priest even that much more impressive, because they were shorter, guys, diminutive compared to all the rest of the guys. Even Chris Cormier, he's got to be 5'10".
Yeah.
That was a whole crew of tall guys.
You're right.
In comparison today, look how big Rami looks next to everyone, and Rami's about the average height of all those guys.
Right. He's about 5'10", I think. I want to say.
Yeah, and there was probably 10 of them in the lineup back then.
Easy.
Yeah. So they were big guys. I'm sure. I wouldn't say so much from Dorian's era, but if you went back as far as, Arnold's era, there certainly was a shift where guys were, 50 pounds bigger.
Yeah.
Arnold at 6'2" was 240. If you're 6'2", 240 today, that makes you classy.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, Bumstead 6 foot. I think he's around 230 on stage.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a totally different thing. But yeah, there was some change along the way, but a lot of it was education, the food, the training methods, that era, Arnold's era, Tom Platz, all those guys, Mike Menser, were kind of the guinea pigs for the later generations of the 90s, where they understood and learned a lot from the training methods of those guys back then.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious as your opinion on, because I talk to, Dr. Juliados every week, and he answers a lot of growth hormone questions. He's constantly saying that he believes up to around 8 IUs of growth hormone a day, you're not going to see any muscle growth, even with gear. You're going to see all the other, the anti-aging benefits, the skin, the hair, the nails, get obviously the lipolysis. You'll be leaner than you would. I remember years ago, Matarazzo, God, this was probably like 92. He was guest posing at a Muscle Mania out in LA or San Diego. And he was eating like this huge piece of chocolate cake. And someone said, Mike, should you really be eating that? Don't you have the Olympia in 10 weeks or something? And he laughed.
Yeah.
He said, I'm on so much GH, it doesn't matter. So, but sort of.
That's what I was saying. That was the thing I noticed. I didn't all of a sudden get huge or anything, but that competition where I had that real Norditropin, I was so peeled that it didn't even make sense. Like how shredded my face was.
Yeah.
That it didn't even look like me.
Wow.
Like the fat in here was gone.
Wow.
So it looked really bizarre. So yeah, I didn't get huge from it, but I got so peeled it was crazy. And that was the only thing that really changed during that prep. I was always doing an hour on the step mill and very low carbs and training the way I train. That particular prep, that was the one thing that was different, that I got, real pharmaceutical GH.
So why did you never try to get that consistently after that?
Well, because it was a rare situation where, the majority of people that get quote unquote real, like Sarahstim, they're getting it from AIDS patients that don't want to use the stuff and don't want to use that much of it. That's why there's 7 bottles of 18 IUs in a kit of Sarahstim. That's meant to be taken 1 bottle a day. That's 18 units a day. So
Wow.
they would get 4, sometimes 6 of them a month to take 1 every day.
Wow.
And a lot of the guys didn't want to take it. You could tell, like there was a period of time you could tell a guy who had AIDS and was taking the growth.
Oh, yeah.
He was shredded, peeled, and he had a little gut.
Yeah.
It was weird, So that should answer the question right there. Yeah. That guy did have a gut. I remember that look of stringy, shredded guys. Like they look like 4% body fat for no reason.
Yep.
And then they had a gut, and you knew that they were hanging in the gay crowd, and it was very assumptive of me. But I being in the training business, I trained a lot of them through the years.
Right.
And I kind of got to know what they looked like.
Yeah.
And there was a certain look. And so as far as the Norditropin, I could have gotten it again, but it wasn't through the same process.
Right.
It wasn't going to come to my house in a cooler sealed. It was going to come from Joe Schmo. And I wasn't going to risk, it comes pre-mixed. So if the temperature isn't perfect, it's going to ruin it, and it's a waste of money. So I would just go with the best option I had available to me.
Generic. I mean, that's what the vast majority of people use, is the stuff from China. Sometimes it has no label on it. The box has no label. It's, you're hoping it's GH, I guess. But it's funny that you say that about the couple gay gentlemen, and God knows I have nothing against, I'm not homophobic at least. But when I was out in Pasadena, California, all those years, at one point there was a gay couple, 2 guys that trained together, and they almost looked like twins. And we called them the Stinky Twins, only because they didn't apply deodorant or something. The body odor was just horrific, and they were, sweaty. It was California. But man, these guys were jacked. They were shredded, and they both had the same big belly. But everywhere else, it's like veins on veins and freaking striations, but then big belly. So they must have, I don't know, maybe they were doing the 18 units a day.
I bet they were. I'm sure if you're doing 18 units a day, something like that is going to happen.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's, I don't know if there's a threshold dose where you start getting those really bad. The acromegaly, the face starts changing because we've all seen it. I remember at the New England years ago. One year there was in the heavyweights, there were like the top 4 guys. I think they were all coached by the same guy, and they all looked like they came off an assembly line. They were bald. They all had horrible skin. They all had the big brow ridge like a Cro-Magnon. You know, the nose, the tissue of the nose. They had a big fat bulb on the end of their nose, big jaw. You could see the elbows, the hands, the feet had all grown, and they were all shorter guys. I want because they were heavies, but they were all like between 5'5" and 5'8". I'm guessing. But they must have been running very high doses because they all had the same look to the point where they all looked like they could be brothers. It was creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, you know, you can make assumptions, and you're probably making a fairly accurate assumption, but there's not enough studies to say this number will give you a gut, or this number will make your head grow, or whatever, you know. My head used to be tiny, just like my brother. And then not too long after, just gear, not growth, my head ballooned, you know. And there was a while people were commenting on my head and Dexter Jackson's head. And it's from eating, from the constant chewing. This muscle on the side of my head just grew like crazy, you know. But that's not from growth. So who the hell really knows? There's no studies out there that are really accurate, that have a real controlled group of people for a long enough period of time to tell us. But so, to be honest, our community, the bodybuilding community, is probably the most informed as far as taking that educated guess, because we do see it probably more than doctors do.
Absolutely.
You know, I don't know. You know, I don't have I can't give you 100% answer, but sure. Is there bad side effects from it? Yep. Is there good effects from it? Yep. Does it build muscle? Sure. Does it make you ripped? Yep. Can it give you a gut? Yep. Is there a somewhat safe zone to stay in? I always err on the side of less, in hopes that I would experience the least amount of negative effects from it. But I think it varies from person to person as well. You know,
I mean, think about how many people now around the world, especially even in the USA, so many older people go to these anti-aging clinics. They're not trying to be bodybuilders. They don't care about any of that, but they do want the benefits, the skin, the hair, the nails. They just want to feel and look a little younger again. That's it. They do call it the fountain of youth for that reason. So you have, I don't know how many thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe of people in the USA taking growth hormone. You know, this is the 50, 60 up crowd, experiencing the benefits. And I'm very certain the majority of them are taking 1 to 4 IUs a day. That's it. So
yeah.
And that I don't hear about any major issues anyone's experiencing with those very conservative doses.
Yeah. Yeah. I never noticed anything. I was at 1, but definitely 4 to 6 was the sweet spot. And I noticed my fingernails would grow like crazy. I'd have to clip them, would seem like every 3 or 4 days, you know?
Yeah.
But I never experienced anything crazy aside from that one prep where it was noticeable that I'd never been that shredded in my life, and haven't been since. You know,
because I mean, condition was never a problem for you. I've never ever seen you close to off at any of the shows. Geez, I probably saw you compete 30 or 40 times. Never saw you off condition once.
Yeah, this was just a different level, a different look. That was hard to duplicate. It just, and I was at an age where my skin was still saran wrapped around the muscle. And it was just the perfect storm. Right. And I was 201. That's what I weighed, and it was a 202 class.
Wow. And
that was the sweet spot. That's where I wish it had stayed.
Oh, that class. Yeah, I remember there was a talk for a while trying to get it to 220. I'm like, You idiots. No, leave it alone.
No, if he had 220, possibly wouldn't have had the reign of Flex Lewis, you know?
Yeah.
You most certainly wouldn't have had Sean Clarita win, you know?
Right.
If he can beat guys that are 210, 212. Once it gets to 220 and most of the lineup is 215 to 220, then it looks like a bantamweight with heavyweights again. It's like, as good as he is, it would be a lot harder, I would say that, for him to climb 40 pounds than it is 20 pounds.
Right. So this is one thing I want to get to with all the divisions and the competitors. We know that it's not just the bodybuilders that use it. The classic, it's used. I've even heard of like bikini girls using growth hormone for whatever reason. I don't know. I guess for the fat burning benefits, but as expensive as it is, and most people do have to pay for it. They're not selling it and they're not getting it for free. You know, what is the cost to benefit ratio? Do you think most of these people are wasting their money?
Well, a lot of the girls can get it
By banging dudes. I understand. But hey, I said it and you didn't say it, guys. Don't blame
by
those.
being hot chicks with dumb dudes. But what are the benefits? I don't know. I mean, it would be the same as with bodybuilders. You know, they need to add a little bit of muscle or get a little bit leaner. You know, I think there would be a sweet spot for them too, like 1 to 2 units max. As long as they're not, and they certainly don't overeat, so they're not going to have the stomach issues. Yeah, that's an interesting. Again, we don't know because there's not enough data on it.
True.
But it would be interesting to know, and how many of those women would be willing to discuss it. You know,
very, very few. I mean, we're never going to get a bikini girl that says, "Yeah, I'm on growth hormone," because people will be horrified. They say, "That's crazy. You're in bikini. Why would you need growth hormone?" But you know,
because they're trying to be number one in the world.
Exactly.
There for sure are many of them out there that do it.
Yeah.
And there are some that they're using Primo and Anavar for sure. I'd say majority of them are using Anavar.
Yeah, absolutely. Clan T3. I mean, it's a whole other ball of wax. What about age? So if a competitor, let's forget the word competitor. If a bodybuilder is older, say 40, 50 years old, do you think they would benefit more from growth hormone just because a younger person theoretically still has it being produced at some level, whereas someone, I'm 51, I'm sure my body stopped making growth hormone, you know, back in the friggin' Reagan administration. But that's Ronald Reagan. He was a president we had, guys. Look it up. Do you believe that if someone older, they're probably going to get more benefits? It's more worthwhile for someone who's older versus a 20 to 25-year-old, even a 30-year-old?
You might have more visible results. I don't know that it would get better results, but I don't know. It's hard to say. It really depends on how they took care of themselves leading up to that point. I don't think growth hormone is going to stop loose skin. I don't think it's going to bring it back to being tight again. But I think if they've taken care of themselves up to that point, it could help maintain the elasticity of the skin that they still have. It would help them to burn body fat, help them to add some muscle. So, yeah, I mean, it would probably be more beneficial, I would say, as long as that person took good care of themselves up to that point. A good example is Sly Stallone. You know, that guy is well documented that he's a big fan of GH, and now he's 75 years old and still ripped and looks unbelievable. I'm sure there's many reasons behind that, like plastic surgery and whatnot, but the guy's physique is still bananas at 75 years old. That's just crazy.
He's still got his shirt off in movies, for God's sake.
Right.
Come on.
Right. He's doing fight scenes, doing his own stunts, and you know, bravo.
So another theory I have, this is just theory, and nobody will know the answer to this, but I believe growth hormone use is a lot more prevalent in older competitors just because of a financial situation. I think guys in their 40s, 50s have a lot more money typically than guys in their 20s and 30s. And growth hormone is very, very expensive. The only other thing I think used in the sport that's probably more expensive is that IGF-1, which I can't talk about because I know nothing about it, but I personally believe that it's a lot more common in older competitors simply because of the financial situation. How many 25-year-olds, if they're trying to use, a typical kit, I think the generic, I've heard price ranges that I hear all the time, ranging from like 250 to 400 for a kit of generic, and you can like double that for the pharmaceutical stuff. But if a younger guy wants to use, 10 IUs a day or something, because he read that that's what the pros use, so it must be true. He can't afford that unless he's, got depending on the kindness of strangers or something. I don't know. Maybe he's got an OnlyFans or I don't know. But do you see that? Do you see older guys using it more just because they can afford it?
No. It's funny, back in the day, a lot of the old school bodybuilders there was a saying that they would say is basically all bodybuilders are drug dealers, because in order to afford the amount of drugs that they want to take, they have to buy in bulk and sell it too. So I think if you're a young kid and you want it bad enough, you'll find a way to get it.
I won't give names or anything, but I do know younger guys in my area. I'm not even gonna say the gym, but that's how they seem to be affording all their gear, all their stuff is selling it on the side. I guess the last thing I want to talk about, because this is kind of an issue with growth hormone, is the generic stuff versus the pharma grade. We know the pharma grade's legit, but you don't know, you haven't tested a million batches of stuff, but just from listening and being around the industry, how much GH out there would you say is real? And do you think there's a lot of it that's actually, there's nothing in it, or maybe it's just some friggin' peptide or something being sold as GH?
I think if it's even remotely, even though they're like underground lab, whatever, these guys rely on their reputation. They're still trying to sell the stuff. And, there's nothing worse for your reputation than to find out it's bunk. So I think there's higher quality ones and there's lower quality ones. I don't think anyone is selling completely empty, like just water, but there's some that are better than others. I mean, it's worthless to send someone a kit that's nothing and then expect them to, recommend you or continue to buy from you if it's shit. Yeah. These companies are they're businesses. They're trying to get the best product for their money with the margin they need. So I think I don't think there's a whole lot of fake where there's none in it. Maybe I'm naive, but I mean, I just don't think.
If you wanted to be a scammer, if you wanted to be a scumbag and sell fake GH, you might get away with it for a while, only because the two things that I do know, that it doesn't work immediately. You don't notice any effects for a while. I've heard anywhere from like a month to 6 months before you start really seeing all the benefits of it, that it's working.
No, that's if you're familiar with it, what it feels like. You'll notice fullness, a roundness to your physique within less than a month, 3 weeks. If it's real, you'll notice, if you know what that feels like.
What about I've heard like wrist pain, like a carpal tunnel syndrome?
Yeah, that's very common. Some people get the numbness in their hands, elbow pain, forearm pain, the carpal tunnel, wrist, hand. Thankfully, I never really experienced that I know of, like the carpal tunnel. My shit hurts all the time anyway, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah. But it's more. You kept your doses very moderate too, though. I mean, maybe if you had been doing 10 to 20 IUs a day, maybe you would have a lot of these. Maybe you would have like a big caveman brow and jaw and fat nose and I know your hands are already gigantic. I can't imagine your hands would get any bigger, but maybe your feet would be like this big. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm going to try it if that's the case. If everything grows accordingly.
Everything being the key word. Hey, that's funny because Dorian was on. I'm not saying Dorian abused GH, guys. Don't get mad. I love Dorian. He was on Giles's Global Muscle with Chris Cormier, And it turns out he has a size 12 US, no, a size 12 UK foot, which would be like a size 15 in US shoes.
Jesus.
So that's, and I'm not saying it's from growth hormone. I'm just talking about big feet. That's a big friggin' foot for a guy who's about 5'10". Damn.
Yeah. Well, same thing for Dave Palumbo.
Yeah.
He said it didn't happen until he was like 35. He went
Yeah.
from like an 11 or 12 to a 16.
Good Lord. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't think anybody would see those crazy results if it's going to happen, because I have heard hands, feet, you know, the soft tissues. I don't think it's going to happen at that lower, 3 to 6 IUs. It's probably going to be a higher dose that would give you those kind of issues, I would guess.
Yeah, no, my feet are still the same. My hands were always big. As I said, my head changed when I started with the other stuff, but I noticed really nothing out of the ordinary from growth.
Remember Barry Bonds, the baseball player? They used to make a big deal. His hat size changed over the years.
His helmet size, yeah.
His helmet size.
Yeah. But here's the thing with Barry Bonds. Major League Baseball players start at 18 years old. Their rookie year, they're 18.
Wow.
He was like 175 pounds. Now, between the age of 18 and 30, 35, you're going to grow significantly, especially if you're an athlete and you train and you're into sports nutrition, you're trying to improve. The average person between 18 and 25, 30, regardless, grows. Now, he definitely juiced his ass off. But I mean, a lot of the changes that they attributed to these guys were way overblown. Yeah. Mark McGuire went from 220 to 270, but the guy's 6'5".
Yeah.
And that was over the course of 20 years.
Yeah. People don't realize how big McGuire, I met him because he was a judge at, remember Louis Wick used to do the Fitness America pageant? He would get these celebrity judges. Yeah. I didn't get to meet Canseco. Canseco judged the one that they had in Miami, but McGuire judged one of the ones out in California. Jeez, that was a big man.
Oh,
6'5". He had to be like 260 or 270. He was a big dude.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
In good shape.
Absolutely. I mean, geez, look at all the home runs he was hitting that year. But okay. I think we covered it pretty well. And I appreciate you even agreeing to talk about this, because I don't like to harp on the drugs either, because I get so peeved that so much. Just to give you a small example, and if he hears this, I'm not using your name, sir, so don't get pissed off. But I had a guy who was prepping, and he has a coach, but of course he's hitting up everyone else to second guess the coach. Yeah. He's like, should I mix this drug and that drug, and how much of this drug should I use? And then I see his pictures he posts, and he's he was 9 weeks out, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, I would never want, if I was prepping someone for a show and they look like this, I'd say, why don't you lose a good 10, 20 pounds of fat, then come back to me, then we'll find a show for you to do. There is no way in hell. There's no way your diet, what the hell, you're not eating right, you got fat. So too many people put all the importance on drugs, and that's a prime example, because to look at this guy, you wouldn't even know he was on drugs. You just say, well, there's a chunky guy. I wonder, hope he gets in shape. I hope he can get in shape someday. And then you'd hear he's competing. Yeah. Oh my God. But yeah. That's a whole other.
Rod, I just want to reiterate again, before people start commenting and saying, I don't know what I'm talking about, I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't know what I'm talking about. All right. Oh, yeah. I beat you to it. I'm not a doctor. I know from my experience and what I've seen and what I've shared with friends through the years within the industry, the effects, I think it's far overblown of GH is killing people, and because I only know of a few people that truly abused it, and those who did it for a very short period of time. And so before you say anything dumb, I never claimed to be a doctor, a expert in this topic. I'm strictly giving you my opinion. And I'm not an advocate of this whatsoever.
But you know why your opinion is more valuable, though? Because you've had the real world experience with yourself and knowing a lot of other people have used it, versus I could have some guy on here who could talk about the chemistry of it and this and that for hours, but he
Right.
wouldn't know what it really does in the real world to real people, especially, you know, bodybuilders. And that's why your opinion to me is 1,000 times more valid.
Yeah, it's funny. I think bodybuilders have more knowledge of steroids than most doctors.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, they read about it and they can give you the chemical breakdown and what it's supposed to do, but a bodybuilder can give you long-term or their experience with long-term use of it and what it's done or what it hasn't done. You know, I know plenty of people who are messed up, but do we know if it's directly from that? They've done many other things on top of steroids. They have genetic components that are predispositions and whatnot. So it's hard to know. Maybe someday we'll know exactly. We'll be able to tell exactly what is what. But until then, it's just you and I talking shit of what we think.
And I'll leave the disclaimer right here in the voice of Mr. Mackey, the guidance counselor from South Park. You familiar with him?
Yeah, I know it is.
He goes, drugs are bad, okay? Shouldn't do drugs. That's it.
There you go. Simple as that.
And with that, fellas, we did it. Another episode of the Boston Mass. So again, go to YouTube. Well, you're on YouTube if you're watching this. Go to a channel called the Boston Mass. Incredible content. Jose does training stuff. Him and this Nate Tello go to gyms all over the place. They do podcasts, interviews, Q&A. It's a really cool channel. If you haven't checked it out, check it out right now. Go to his Instagram, The Boston Mass, with 2 E's, at The Boston Mass. And of course, I've been getting, anytime I wore the shirt saying they want to know, where can I get that? Merchandise is available at thebostonmass.com. Pick up your, and it's all high quality stuff, guys. I can tell you, I've got some shirts that have fallen apart, lost their color. All my Jose Raymond Boston Mass shirts, hoodies and everything. And I think I have some that are like 10 years old or more, right?
Yeah.
Still
alive.
They've been sweated on and washed a lot, and they're still kicking. They still look great. So that's it. Thank you so much, Jose. Appreciate you taking the time.
Ron. Appreciate it.
Everybody, thanks for watching. No Way Jose with Jose Raymond, the Boston Mass. We'll see you next time.